What is a rolling bevel? And how do I cut one without one of these big ship saws? Well, I really don't need one. My plank's only 1/2 inch thick. As this plank twists and rolls, this bevel changes. Today, I'm going to show how I cut a rolling bevel by hand. In addition, we're going to take a little field trip out to Napa, California. All that coming up on this episode of The Art of Boat Building. Every plank begins with its own spiling batten. I'm going to put a few more planks on here so we can get down around the bilge where that rolling bevel becomes a little more obvious. The first step is to get some planking stock prepared. After offering up the starboard plank and getting it to fit really well, I then offered it to the port side to see how well it fit. It looks like it fits pretty good. So I'm going to use that as a pattern for the port side plank. Now it's a matter of just tracing that out. So while I do that and cut it out and get the planks on the boat, let's take that trip out to Napa, California, where last month I had the wonderful opportunity to meet Ruth and Garrett, a couple of amazing boat builders. You may be familiar with their YouTube channel, Salt and Tar. After arriving at the Napa boatyard, it was easy to find the brilliant red boat, Rediviva. After a warm welcome and a tour of the boat, we sat down on the foredeck for a conversation about their boat building journey.
So, first question I want to know is what drew you to George Buehler's boat design?
Definitely his overall philosophy. All his boats and his philosophy, they're based on traditional working boats. Back in the time before yachting came around, people used boats for their livelihood. So. And a lot of times, you know, they built them themselves. They weren't shipwrights, but they had to build something that they could go out in any weather every day and put a lot of weight on them and come back and just do it over and over and over. So they had to be strong, but they were also built out of readily available materials and fairly simple. I started reading a lot of his, one could call them rants, on his website, and I love the way he wrote. He was very outspoken on disapproval of, not disapproval in a way that it doesn't work.
And that there's only one way.
Yeah, and that the standard kind of idea that, or the mentality that there's only one way to build a wooden boat. You know, you have to use teak and you have to use mahogany and lead and bronze and copper, and like if you do it that,
spend thousands and thousands of dollars.
And that's the only way to do it. And George Buehler's, no, like, it was done this way for a very long time, and the only spot that we had to build a boat was in a patch of dirt in the forest in the middle of nowhere with no power and electricity and only a generator and really old tools. I figured
kind of the only realistic.
we probably couldn't be building a Lyle Hess beautiful wine glass boat. We just didn't have the money or the tools or the place to do it.
Well, you'd still be building it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good point. That's one of a huge part that drew me towards George Buehler, is that it was my dream to build a wooden boat, and one, I do really find the workboat style beautiful. A lot of people find it, ugly or whatever. But I think there's a beauty in that ruggedness. But mainly, we've been sailing and traveling on boats our entire adult lives. It's the life that we're used to. So while it was a dream to build a boat, I didn't want to spend 15 years doing it. And with George Buehler's boats, he specs readily available materials, and they're much more simple to build. So I figured, we could build it a lot sooner and be back out sailing a lot quicker.
Right.
And it was neat that George Buehler was still alive when we started, so Garrett was able to work closely with him to design this boat,
Yeah, 'cause
based off of one of his old designs that he had done for somebody else. But then he was so excited to touch that design again.
he
that
went above and beyond.
Yeah, he went above and beyond and pretty much designed us.
Yeah, because I think I
Unique
read
boat.
that you'd kind of passed over this one at first because it wasn't quite what you wanted. And then
Yeah, we were looking at all those stock designs, and we found the original. This design's called the Button, and it was really close to what we were looking for with, all the
high
shear
shear
and the
was the
plumb
main
bow
thing.
and everything. But there's, originally it was a totally different deck and rig and everything. So I emailed him. It's like, I found this boat and I like it, but I want to change all these things about it. And he was just like, all right, let's do it. And he got really into it and said he had been thinking about kind of redoing that design for years, but just never had an excuse to do it. So he designed us a whole new boat. It's a completely different
Oh,
hull.
really?
Yeah,
Huh.
he changed everything about it, and but he only charged us a modification fee. But he redesigned a new boat for us. Really great to work with, and I emailed back and forth with him a lot, and it was great too, because that same thing that you've seen his writing, very kind of just like, blunt and very forward, and which is, I think, a lot of maybe reasons he got a reputation of.
He could rub people the wrong way.
But
Yeah.
I loved it because
Yeah.
I would email him and be like, so George, I was thinking about doing this thing this way, and he emailed me back, why the hell would you do that? Just do it the way I said in the boat building book. It works and it's simpler. Just do it that way. And I'd be like, all right, I think you're right. And he'd be like, yep, good for you. Like, go get it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really exciting that you got to, that you actually got to know him before he passed away,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, he was.
And in a way that most people don't.
Another similarity between me and George Buehler is what I like so much about reading everything he was saying when I was looking into his designs is what really drew me. Like, yeah, this is a designer for me. Is the rants that he would go on, and I realized that a lot of times when people ask us questions about the boat, I'll totally go on similar rants. I'll start talking about the yachting propaganda and why they're brainwashing people, and
Yeah.
there's more than one way to do it, and I'm like, all right, I kind of went off there.
I've joked, we both joked that we were 23 when we started building this boat, but it's probably about 65 now. Garrett sure shows his age when things like that, 'cause you'll be like, kids these days. I'm like, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where's the name Rediviva come from?
Yeah, so Rediviva came, pretty much, we found the name because where we were building the boat was off of the Columbia River, and the Columbia River was named after an American tall ship called the Columbia Rediviva. And then kind of liked the sound of it and looked into the meaning, and the meaning is really what made the name shine, and we're like, that's the name of the boat. Rediviva, it's Latin for rebirth or revival. And for us, building this boat and getting back to our life of sailing and traveling, and this boat kind of lives and breathes Garrett and what you believe.
Rediviva, rebirth, new coming of life and everything. We had lived on boats and sailed on boats since, we bought our first boat together at 17. When we turned 18, sailed down to Mexico. We've been sailing, living on boats ever since. And then we decided to build a boat. We left the sailing life, went up to the forest, complete culture shock, different life.
Yeah.
And so when we go sailing again, it will be Rediviva. It will be a rebirth, a revival, coming back to the life that we know and love.
Quickly, do you think you'll get your sails up?
If we stay focused and stay on it, we could be doing sea trials this summer.
Neat.
Will that happen? Who knows? I mean,
the goal is this year, I think.
Yeah. The goal is really hopefully by like next fall, the sea trialing. So we'll see. It could be this or as early as this summer, or it could be 3 summers from now. Who knows?
Well, it's been a real pleasure watching you build it.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
it's been really exciting to meet you.
Yeah. Likewise.
I had a really great time out in Napa talking with Ruth and Garrett. It's really great to have a chance to talk with fellow boat makers. I really didn't know that much about George Buehler designs, and I really have a new appreciation for them after spending some time there on Rediviva. If you follow Ruth and Garrett on their channel Salt and Tar, leave me a comment below. Also, what do you think about George Buehler's designs? Again, leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. So now let's get to making that rolling bevel. Well, the first thing I did is I marked a line here from where the bottom of the plank would be here to here. And I made it in red simply so that it'd be a little easier for it to show up on the camera. So after I mark that, this is how we're going to determine how that bevel is. So right now, the bevel off of here is really close to what 90 degrees would be, like so. You can see that. Now, that's not very accurate because you can see that there's a curve to the frame here where it's starting into the bilge. So there's a couple of things we need to do. First, I created a little storyboard like so, and the storyboard is, I drew a line across here. This is a piece of 1/2 inch scrap from the planking. So I drew a line representing the thickness of the plank. I then marked off some right angle marks on here, station marks. So this boat will not have a very drastic rolling bevel, so I'm going to measure about every 2 frames. So now that we've got this little storyboard made, we can take, I'm going to take this little block of wood, and I'm going to line it up with that line, like that. And I'm going to clamp that in place. Now what we'll do is take our bevel gauge, and we'll put that on there and measure what that angle is. Then we take our gauge, our storyboard block here, and we line that up with the bottom, what would be the bottom of the plank there, like so. So if I can get that so the camera can see it. And then we're going to make a mark here. So this then is the bevel that we're shooting for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go every other frame here and mark that out on my storyboard. Now I'm spiling the batten onto the plank. And you can see I have the port side plank prepared here and glued up. And I used this plank, the angles of it, to line this up so you can see how they're sitting parallel to one another. Now that we have our plank all laid out, we can now refer to this storyboard that I created. You can see here at station 19, the angle that the distance up here is about 3/32. So what I did was I added 3/32 to the spiled line here. That way, that'll give me enough extra material so that when I cut that bevel, that top piece will still fit tight against the plank above it. So the next step now is to cut this out, and then we can start cutting those bevels. The next thing that I do is a technique called slipboarding, where I take my plane, which is nice and square, and I lay it on its side, and I bring the plank up with a little piece of scrap underneath there to raise it up, and that way I can plane the board down right to where the line is. And I do this on all of the planks, so I'll go all the way around and get it all squared up first, and then we'll cut those bevels. Now that we've got everything trimmed up and squared up, we can start cutting our bevels in there. So here we are at station 19, and what we need to do first is to take our storyboard and to set our bevel at the bevel that is at station 19. And then we simply take a rasp, and this one's slightly rounded, and we start trimming some off of here. And every once in a while, we need to check the bevel. So a little more. Looks pretty good. So now I'll go down to the next station 17 and set my bevel. So now that I've got all those marked out down the plank, now it's just a matter of taking my block plane and planing these down so that I keep these bevels in here. And so essentially, I'll be slowly changing that bevel. So in a sense, it's sort of like connecting the dots. Okay, so you can see how that bevel slowly is changing from one angle to the other on down the plank. So the next thing that we need to do after we get this bevel cut is we need to do a process that's called backing out. And that's something that we'll do in the next video. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you the next time.